We're going back to the moon because it's the next step in our journey to Mars.
We were always going to the moon.
Pushing ourselves to explore is just core to who we are. That's a part of being a human.
And liftoff. We shall return.
Continuing to test out every bit of Orion.
Coming back to Earth, 7 miles a second.
When humanity sets big goals, we can bring together genius from around the world.
You have the best people on planet Earth putting this vehicle together.
That's what's up.
To innovate for the benefit of humanity and to inspire the world through discovery.
And here we go.
Good afternoon and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'm Sandra Jones and we are here today to discuss the Artemis II mission and the ongoing historic first ever crewed flight test of the Orion spacecraft. Here to provide a status on the mission thus far is John Honeycutt, manager for NASA's Space Launch System program, Judd Freeling, Artemis II flight director, Debbie Korth, Orion deputy program manager, and Kelsey Young, lead for NASA's Science Mission Directorate. We'll start with some brief opening remarks from each of our briefers before we jump into questions here in the room as well as on our phone bridge. If you are dialed into our phone bridge, please press *1 to submit your name to the queue. If you do feel your name has been called already, please press *2 and you can withdraw your question. Once your name is called, please do state your name, affiliation, and to whom you'd like to direct your question. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to John for his opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Yeah, I think most of you know that I've kind of been on a hiatus from my SLS job for the last 7 or 8 months and running the mission management team, but we'll talk a little bit more about SLS as I get through my opening remarks. It's good to be here with you all today, be back with you again. As we continue the Artemis II mission. First things first, integrity remains on a free return trajectory and is on the outbound transit towards the moon with lunar flyby day 6, which is Monday coming up. So very excited about that. As you heard yesterday, Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy are now closer to the moon than they are to Earth. I can tell you they've been incredibly busy. I know you've been watching coverage of the mission. I think you'll agree. It looks like they're really enjoying their work, and I can tell that in their voice when we're listening to the voice loops. And then all the imagery that we've been getting is pretty incredible. So the crew took this image yesterday. We got an image. Come on there. Stand by. So they took this image yesterday. On the far left, you can see features of the moon that have never been seen by human eyes. Until yesterday, only robotic imagers have seen this region of the moon. And then in the next image, you can see Commander Reed Weissman getting a view of the Earth from Integrity's window. That's quite a bit different than what he saw from the International Space Station. That's absolutely beautiful. From a mission management team perspective, we continue to meet daily to discuss status and get updates from the flight operations team, Orion, consider mission risk throughout all those conversations. We get an update on payload utilization and then discuss any anomalies and any necessary actions. Currently, coming out of the meeting today, we're working through a couple of items that you're going to hear more from Judd and Debbie. They can discuss those. None of those were any increase in mission risk or impacts to the mission. The team has not asked the MMT to take on any additional risk so far. As part of today's meeting, we did get an outbrief from the SLS team. Judd said a couple of days ago that it looked like things went perfectly through launch, and the data certainly bears that out for SLS. The bottom line is the SLS rocket performance was, again, just like Artemis I, in fact, a little bit better right down the middle, and our insertion accuracy was within less than 1%. You know, I've talked off and on relative to things that are important to me throughout the mission, primarily with entry interface, right? Because that's the big one that gets us home and gets the crew boots back on Earth. But it certainly it doesn't go without mentioning that, you know, the first step in that is getting the rocket ready, and then the next step is having a SLS deliver the spacecraft to the point in space where it needs to be. And so it did that with 99.92% accuracy. That was a big bullseye, and I'm very happy about that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Judd.
Okay, thanks, John. Let's see, on the back half of Cruise Day yesterday, they performed a CPR demo just to figure out where would be a good spot in integrity to do CPR if they needed to do that. They had a public affairs outbrief. We also did a test of the search, acquire, and track mode of the Orion communication system. So that's if Orion, for some reason, loses its pointing knowledge, then it can go acquire communication with Earth on its own. Crew did check out of their med kits. They did some also a Nat Geo event there. They also had, we also did a DSN emergency comm test again to test out the ranging on the emergency comm system to make sure that was all working, everything went well. Jeremy also had another CSA public affairs conference, planned medical conference. During the night, we tried to vent the wastewater tank that's attached to the toilet. We had problems with that due to suspected blockage, we think probably due to ice. So we directed the crew overnight to use their collapsible contingency urine devices, just like they did on flight day 1. Let's see, this morning we had our normal planning conferences. We also had the private family conferences and also the private psychological conferences that were planned. Additionally, we did we're going to do another test of the PWD and take videos of that just so we can get that data to the engineering teams. The planned trajectory correction for today, OTC-2, was canceled because, again, Orion is doing such a great job. We had great insertion accuracy. We had a good TLI burn, so we ended up canceling that. A benefit of canceling that, too, side benefit, it allowed us to put Orion space capsule in an attitude that will put sun on the vent of that wastewater tank to see if we can try to heat that up and get that wastewater vented. We were partially successful. We got about half of the tanks out of half of the urine out of those tanks. So we'll continue to troubleshoot on that. Later today, we'll do the manually piloting demo part 2, which will test out the 6 degree of freedom versus the 3 degree of freedom modes of the capsule, so we can get detailed information on how those behave. We'll also, the crew will videotape the exercise device so we can get engineering data on how that exercise device is working. We'll also do another VIP event for the Canadian Space Agency. We'll do some imaging, taking pictures out the window, and then the crew has their planned medical conferences. That's all I have, and I'll hand it over to Debbie, and she'll talk about the Orion systems.
All right, thank you, Judd. So yeah, I'm pleased to report that the Orion spacecraft, it's in very good health, continues to operate nominally on its way to the moon, so there's no major anomalies that we're working at this time. I'm going to pull up the first image, if you could, of the exterior view of the spacecraft. So this is a beautiful view of the Orion with the sun shining off of that SIOX tape that covers all of those TPS backshell tiles. We actually yesterday performed a routine external inspection of the entire spacecraft to make sure that it's healthy for that return trip when it needs to come back home. And again, please report, found no damage to any tiles, no major tape removals or anything, so it looked really good. We did side-by-side comparisons to Artemis I, actually looks quite a bit better than even Artemis I did at this point in the mission. We also, this image here, I guess I should mention, is from our optical communication system. So it's been downloading gigabytes of data throughout the mission. So this is one of the high resolution images that we got of Orion throughout the days so far. And let's see. We are still continuing to troubleshoot the urine venting, as Judd mentioned. I did have a partial successful venting after the maneuvers that Judd mentioned, getting some sunlight on that vent. The vents are located, the primary vent's located near that umbilical, that white block you see at the bottom there between the crew module and the crew module adapter. And so we think it's probably been seeing more shadow than anticipated. And so by heating that up, we were able to get some of the urine out, but clearly didn't solve the whole problem. So continuing to troubleshoot that. Should mention, this is a common occurrence. We saw these kinds of events on shuttle as well. So we have some tools in the toolkit. We'll be looking out on what else we can do there. The toilet itself is operable. This is a test flight. We're figuring out how all these systems work together, but it is operable and we have redundancy to get us through the mission. Let's see. I guess we'll go to the next photograph. This is actually inside the spacecraft. It's maybe a little dark to see. We had the crew members turn the lights off or down low so they can actually take some really great images out of the windows. So I'm not sure if you can see, but I think Jeremy may be taking some photographs out the window, and Christina's back there working on the PC on her laptop computer. So anyway, a beautiful view of the inside. Most of the daytime pictures we see are really lit up, so it was nice to see the crew performing some of the other operations in the capsule. So I guess the spacecraft continues to operate nominally. Our team remains hard at work, making sure we're testing out all of the systems, getting through all the flight test objectives, and continuing to work the minor things that we have on our list. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kelsey.
Yeah, really pleased to be here today. We're now 2 days away from the lunar flyby, which is planned for Monday. So as we just heard earlier, the moon is now closer to the crew than the Earth is. So we're really gearing up to support the flyby. April 1st was an exciting day to launch because we have some really exciting observations planned for the day that the crew will actually fly by the moon. I actually have a visual video to show you guys of, in just 1 minute, the entire several-hour flyby. So if you could pull that up, that'd be great. When they start the flyby, they'll be able to see big chunks of the near side. That's the side that we can look up at night when they're observing the moon and be able to see that near side as well. As they get closer, they'll start to focus on that near side, far side transition. Again, the far side is the side of the moon that always faces away from our own planet. So as they get closer, they'll be able to see features that human eyes have never before seen. Earlier, Orientale was mentioned. This was a really exciting scientific destination. They got eyes on it yesterday from pretty far away. They'll have an opportunity during the flyby to spend a lot of time checking it out. You see Earthset where Earth disappeared behind the far side of the moon, and you're about to see it pop out the other side, of course, in Earthrise. And then a really interesting opportunity we have for Monday's flyby is we will actually, from the vantage point of integrity, the sun will pass behind the moon from their perspective, creating a solar eclipse from a perspective that is very, very unique to this mission. It will be a roughly 53-minute eclipse, and then they'll see sunrise where the sun pops out the other side of the moon. There's a lot of science objectives baked into what the crew are going to be doing during the flyby. Those science objectives were developed by our lunar science team. I think we can go to a video of where the lunar science team is currently stationed in Building 30 across campus here in the science evaluation room. We developed a set of 10 lunar science objectives that were based on our lunar science and planetary science driving questions in lunar and planetary science. And as a result, we developed a targeting plan for the crew to follow on Monday. They're actually reviewing that plan today. They all have about an hour book kept on their timelines to review the plan for Monday, and we're looking forward to hearing their observations and ultimately, of course, seeing the photos that they downlink. The crew has spent many, many months training in a variety of different environments to make these really scientifically impactful observations, and so we're really excited as we're getting closer to the moon for all of this really wonderful lunar science the crew are going to be able to do for us. I'm excited to hear your questions.
Okay, great. So now we'll open it up for questions here in the room. We'll start here in the front row with Marcia.
Hi, Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. I'm sorry I have to ask some toilet questions.
Your mic's on.
Oh, Marcia Dunn, Associated Press, with some toilet questions, if you don't mind. I'm assuming right now the toilet's no-go for number 1, but okay for number 2. Sorry to have to ask this. And how many backup bags, do you have, the contingency pouches? Because I know you use so many to try to fill up with drinking water. So you got plenty enough of those, and how frustrated are you because you thought you got it fixed, and here we are again?
Yeah, so the toilet is, it technically will work with number 1 right now, but we just want to keep the tanks half full right now until we figure out what's going on with the vent line. Absolutely, it'd still go for number 2. As far as the collapsible contingency urine devices, each crew member has 2 of those. But they can be either vented overboard, which we've proven that still works, or we could be collected in contingency water bags. But we don't anticipate that we'll have to do that since we can still vent those units overboard.
Thank you.
The urine tank that is in the vehicle is only about the size of a small, like your office trash can. So we want to make sure we can empty it out before we put anything else in there.
Thank you both. Next up, we'll take a question from Eric Berger.
Hi, Eric Berger, Ars Technica. 2 questions. I guess the first one's for Mr. Honeycutt. You guys come out here and everyone's sort of calm, and we see on the video things are calm. Can you just kind of take us inside the MMT or sort of behind the scenes and just talk about, is everything kind of as calm sort of as it appears? Like, is everything under control? Because, if I go back to sort of the shuttle days, it was kind of the same kind of thing, but behind the scenes, you find out that it's fairly frenetic. So I'd just like to get a little bit of sort of view of, because it looks like you guys, it looks like things are going really well. And then a question either for Judd or Debbie. You mentioned the 6 DOF and 3 DOF control tests today. For Artemis 3, Artemis 4, a nominal mission, how much of the flying on those missions will be manual versus do you anticipate it being almost all automated unless there's some kind of contingency necessary? Thank you.
Yeah, so, I've been accused of not worrying or getting excited about things and kind of even keel, and I see that in the rest of the team in the meetings every day. Now, we spent a great deal of time training, and the training team gave us some really hard things to work throughout training. And so I think it's a tribute to the amount we trained about and how good the teams are working together. I've been very pleased with the way that the Orion team, the MER team, and FOD have been integrating across each other prior to coming to the MMT, so we got pretty crisp stories. So we've had some things to talk about. The MMT's asking good questions across the board. I think I'm getting really good answers from the technical teams that are in the room presenting. So I don't have any doubt at all if we run into something that gets a little tougher, I think things will still remain calm. I think the teams get ahead of it before they get to the MMT and generally come back with good recommendations.
As for your second question about manual versus automatic control on future missions, the anticipation is that most of the time the crew will be using the automatic mode, but whenever we're trying to rendezvous with a target vehicle, that's the time that we would be using a manual mode so that we have that, visual cues to closing rates and things like that so that we can, rendezvous there. So I don't know, Debbie, if you want to expand on that at all.
No, I think that's pretty much covers it. I mean, I think part of the demo is really seeing how the handling qualities might degrade if you ended up in a 3 DOF situation versus 6 DOF, and we plan to fly in 6 DOF. So this is all about, like I said, a test flight, figuring out how this vehicle handles. And I think this manually piloting demo, we've got part of it coming up, and then there's another part later in the mission to just really understand how it works if they do have to take over manual control in any kind of situation.
Thank you. Next up, Joey Roulette.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. I just wanted to quickly follow up on that question for Debbie. You said no major anomalies on this mission. Is there anything that you guys are tracking that are not typically major, I guess, but that were off nominal? And I'm also curious to hear, what everyone thinks about the internet's fixation on the toilet issue. The internet, they love space toilets for some reason. I'm just curious to hear, your guys' perspective on that and how you perceive that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think space toilets and bathrooms is something everybody can really understand. We're flying it for the first time. Apollo didn't have that kind of technology in the vehicle, so it's always a challenge. They still have challenges on the space station with toilets. It's just a very complicated thing to accomplish. So some of the things we're seeing, were not totally unexpected. The icing events is things we've seen before, so I think we've got ways to work through that. We just got to figure out how we can point the vehicle the way we need to. There's other constraints with pointing the vehicle for power generation and thermal protection of the vehicle. So how do all these things work together? And you can only test that once you get the vehicle up in space for the first time. So no issues there. Other small things I just mentioned. I mean, there are a lot of little things we're working every day. I wouldn't say anything major. The crew did detect a kind of a smell coming from the UWMS or the hygiene bay area, but not a biological smell. Something. So we're trying to figure out what could that possibly be. So we have analyzers on board we can look, but we're not seeing anything off nominal in our power systems, our thermal systems. So, we'll be looking into that to make sure we can understand what that might be. I can't think of anything really else. I mean, there's like a lot of little things, but that's probably the only thing that we've got teams really looking into at this point.
I think the fixation on the toilet is kind of human nature, right? I mean, everybody knows how important that is to us here on Earth, and it's harder to manage in space. So it's, I'm interested in, I know we're in a good state right now, but I would really like for it to be in the best state that it can be for the crew's sake. They're kind of like, it's a little bit of camping in space already, but then it makes the camping a little bit tougher when you don't have the full capability of the toilet. But, they're okay, and they're trained to manage through the situation.
We'll continue down the row with Irene.
Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. Regarding the demonstrations on the proximity operations, rendezvous, and eventual docking with HLS, what's the current thinking when HLS is flying, whether Orion or HLS would be the active vehicle, which active, which passive? And then I had a separate question about Orion, considering this being the first flight of a crewed vehicle, compared to the other systems. There haven't been that many, a handful maybe. How would you compare this performance on the first flight with some of the previous Dragon, Starliner, maybe even shuttle going back? Thanks.
So I'll take the first part. Whichever vehicle the crew's in will be the active vehicle. And so if Orion is rendezvousing with HLS, for instance, Orion would be the active vehicle. And then when they would come back from the moon, then HLS would be the active vehicle rendezvousing with Orion. As to your second question, I don't know. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of information on the earlier or the more recent crewed vehicle test flights and things that they experienced. I would say Orion's performing remarkably well, so we are pleasantly surprised. We're hoping that this is what we were going to see, but we did fly a lot of redundancy in our systems in case we didn't. So as far as those comparisons, I'd probably have to defer to someone who knows more about what happens, directly in Dragon and those other vehicles.
Okay, our next question's here in the front.
Hi, Philip Sloss. One question for Judd. Are you going to plan on doing an OTC-3 burn, or is it possible to delete that as well? And then for Dr. Young, just to clarify, the eclipse, the 53-minute long eclipse, where is that in that 3-hour flyby window? Thank you.
So currently, OTC, the outbound trajectory correction number 3, we do plan to do that based on our current numbers. So. And we'll do that with the SM reaction control system.
And the eclipse, so the fly-by-day profile will look like a roughly 5-hour period where the crew is observing the moon. Like in the video you guys saw, they'll see the illuminated surface of the moon. And then a short time after Earthrise, we will kind of have a break in lunar viewing attitude where they'll be doing some other tasks before then pivoting back to look at the eclipse. So the 53-minute eclipse is roughly, an hour after Earthrise at the end of the flyby window.
Thank you. Next up, Jackie.
Hi there, Jackie Waddles with CNN. Another question for Dr. Young. I just wanted to ask, because the president's budget request came out yesterday, and we saw another proposal to cut 47% of NASA's science budget. I just wanted to ask you, how are you thinking about how that changes the agency's science initiatives and even some programs that help support Artemis, even though I know Artemis had an increase in funding. And also would just love to know how that's affecting employee morale and what you're doing to kind of keep employees happy. Thanks.
Our briefing today is focused on Artemis II. Our budget numbers are available online at nasa.gov/budget. If you guys have any additional questions, you can reach out to Public Affairs after about the budget. Thanks. Let's go to another question in the second row. Yes.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com for Dr. Young. When we spoke back in September, there was a lot of uncertainty about what the crew would be able to see during the flyby coming up, and I imagine that kind of came down to the launch on April 1st. So I'm really curious, given that they're going through their targets today, their geography and whatnot, what you are hoping, I guess, to see, or what they're looking at the most in terms of what they have to practice, and then how do you keep them not looking at the moon outside of that 5-hour period as they're on approach and on the way out? Thanks.
Relatable question. Absolutely. So it was a really interesting challenge, and we did speak back in September about how to scope the flyby, given that, what targets will be visible to them are entirely dependent on when exactly they arrive at the moon, right? At any given moment in time, 180 degrees of the moon is illuminated and 180 degrees is not. And so what we did was we actually built a list of targets or features on the lunar surface for the entire 360 degrees of the moon, because we knew that once they launched and we realized when they'd get there, we'd be able to narrow down what was visible and from there prioritize based on our science objectives. And so as we were getting closer to this April launch window, we were building out that target list of how we would prioritize, launching throughout the April launch window. And then ultimately, of course, we launched on April 1st. So actually yesterday, the science evaluation room, the room that was showed earlier on screen, you can bring it up now again if you'd like, they were working to basically finalize that list of lunar targets that will ultimately go up to the crew and be executed on Monday. So what the crew are studying today is like the 80% solution. It's a study guide, and then tonight the final targeting plan will get uplinked to them, and they will review that prior to the flyby on Monday. And so we really, in that way, are able to maximize the science that we're getting out of the flyby by waiting until we know exactly when we're going to get there and maximizing the science out of that specific illumination profile that are presented to us. So I'll say that, the last part of your question about kind of where has the most effort gone into, I'd say we had done a lot of planning for months on the targets of interest on the illuminated lunar surface. The eclipse, we really started to focus on in the last few weeks. And so we put a lot of effort into fleshing out those prompts, because ultimately the crew, to execute this plan, will be looking at their lunar targeting plan on their crew tablets and executing target by target by target based around prompts that the science team provides to them. So we put a lot of effort in the last several weeks into eclipse planning, in addition to continuing to flesh out the lunar targets in their own right.
We are going to take a few questions from our phone bridge next. If you are on the phone and you have a question, reminder to please press *1 to get into the queue. We'll start with Nell Greenfield-Boyce with NPR.
For taking my question. This is another science-related question. You talked about maximizing the science. Could you talk about, actually the science questions that you want to address, for example, with the eclipse? I'm not clear. Have people seen an eclipse like this before? And if not, what will the astronauts be able to contribute that would tell you something about, the sun? What are the actual science questions? And similarly, with the lunar targets, I guess, people on the street might feel like, well, don't we have a lot of pictures of the moon and orbiters and things like that? What are the actual questions? What is being maximized in terms of what you'll be able to know based on what the astronauts are doing? Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad somebody asked me about science objectives. Absolutely. We have, like I said, 10 lunar and planetary and solar system science questions for the mission that ultimately feed our targeting plan. So I'm going to take your question in two halves. The first part of your question was eclipse focused. Yes, Apollo crews saw similar eclipses, which again, in this context means that from the vantage point of the crew capsule, the moon is blocking the sun from view. What's different about the eclipse for the crew here is that, you know, for us, I don't know if any of you saw any of the total solar eclipses over the last few years. Actually, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the North American eclipse from 2024. What's unique about viewing eclipses from the Earth's surface is that from our vantage point, the moon and the sun in the sky appear approximately the same size. And that's why you can see that beautiful ring of fire when the moon moves, you know, takes center stage in front of the sun. Of course, Integrity has a much different view than we do. And so the moon appears much, much, much larger in their view than it does from us here on Earth. And so that's why in that visual you saw earlier, the sun appears as a relatively small disk. And that means that instead of the ring of fire eclipse that we see here on Earth, they'll actually see the solar corona, but only part of it. And so we have science questions designed around looking at solar activity at the time of the eclipse. And so they'll actually be able to make, you know, unique observations on Monday, April 6th, and what the sun is doing at the time. We've included prompts for them to describe the features that they can see in the solar corona, which can ultimately help solar scientists understand these processes in general, especially given the unique vantage point that the crew are going to have relative to our orbiting spacecraft here on Earth and our observers, our scientists here on Earth as well. Jumping to the second part of your question on just non-eclipse related science and lunar science, we do, again, we took our driving science questions from our community documents, our Science Mission Directorate decadal surveys, which represent the highly prioritized science objectives that the entire community are driving toward. And what we did is prioritize them based on what Artemis II and our mission profile are really uniquely able to accomplish. For example, human beings are really good at making nuanced color observations. We have amazing camera data from, you know, decades of orbiting spacecraft, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. You know, I'm based at the Goddard Space Flight Center. I love LRO and all the data it's been able to tell us about lunar science. However, the human eye, especially when it's connected to a well-trained brain, which I assure you these 4 people have, are capable of just in literally the blink of an eye making nuanced color observations that Apollo observations told us can tell us something scientifically. When Jack Schmitt on Apollo 17 saw orange soil and he collected that sample, they launched back into orbit and saw that same orange hue from when they got, you know, from the surface to when they went to orbit. That told us something that volcanic processes were active on the lunar surface much more recently than we had expected before. We're looking for the crew to take time during their flyby, let their eyes adjust to what they're seeing, and call out any of those subtle color nuances, especially on the parts of the far side that have never been seen before by human eyes. And we're able to ask more intelligent questions because of what Apollo gave us and because of what those orbiting spacecraft provided to us. Another example, and I swear I'll stop soon, you've got me all excited about the science, is photometry. And that's essentially taking advantage of differing illumination conditions throughout the flyby. And so the analogy I like to give, and we actually ran this exercise with the crew in training, is imagine a sandbox. You know that when you go to the beach, sand is not perfectly flat. There's texture, there's different particle sizes. Turn off the lights in a room, look at that sandbox, shine a light shining directly on top of it. What you'll see is color. You'll see the shades of color and albedo on that surface. Take the same light source and move it to the side. You'll lose all the color nuance, but you will see topography and morphology. Comparing those two angles allows us scientifically to really understand lunar surface evolution. And though we can't move the sun in this mission, we can move integrity. And so by looking at the same targets more than once throughout their flyby, they'll be able to make observations about the same targets in different illumination conditions that would take some spacecraft days, months, weeks, years to build up. And the fact that they're able to see that in the duration of several hours can really help us dive deep on some of our really high priority driving lunar science questions.
Thanks, Kelsey. Next up, we'll go to the phone bridge. We have Lauren Grush with Bloomberg.
Hi, thank you so much. I think this question is for Debbie. I wanted to check back in about that isolated helium feed that was brought up yesterday. Just wanted to make sure that second line is still holding up okay. And I think I was a little confused about the answer that was given on the redundancy of that system if the second helium feed that's being used right now goes down. What did it mean that you don't need to regulate? I'm just wondering if I could get some more clarity on that. Thanks so much.
Sure, yeah. So as mentioned yesterday, I believe we did isolate one branch of our MON line as a part of the SM prop system. And we have not exactly determined what is happening there. We saw a little bit of pressure rise, which was higher than, or not in family with what we had seen in previous testing, and so we isolated that branch. The secondary branch is completely redundant and is completely operable right now, so we have no concerns about being able to operate the prop system. The remaining burns that we have actually don't require the helium pressurization into the MON system tank. The MON system tank is now holding an amount of helium that it already needs. It backfilled the prop it already used up with the helium, so it's already primed and be ready to go for the remaining burns that we would need. If we did have an issue on that branch, we can always go back to the other branch. Using the other branch is not precluded just because of this item that we saw, this feature. We just decided to isolate that one and use from a health perspective, use the healthiest branch for any remaining burns. Those burns are really small. I'm sure Judd could speak more to what we have left to do, but that's why we said we don't need the helium pressurization anymore, because the MON tank already has the pressure in it that it needs to execute the remaining burns with, I think, 4 to 5 times more than we would actually need based on the predicted burns.
Yeah, I'll add, so the trajectory corrections that we have, we skipped the first 2. We got 4 planned remaining. Each one of those we budgeted maybe 30 seconds or so for, and we're really only seeing we only need probably 10 seconds at most, and so we've got plenty of ullage is what we call it. So plenty of pressurization in the system to not have to use the helium, even if we had a problem with the secondary line.
And I guess I should also mention we are also protecting for an off-nominal type of abort situation. In that case, you may have to use a pressurization system, and the second branch is perfectly healthy to accommodate that as well. So we have not lost any redundancy or fault tolerance in our system. We just decided to isolate the one branch that we didn't like the behavior and proceed with the rest of the mission on the secondary branch.
We'll take one more question from the phone before coming back into the room. Next up is Joseph Howlett with Scientific America.
Hi, yeah, this is for Kelsey. I'm curious if there's a particular lunar feature or another that you're excited to get human eyes on. Is there something that in particular that you're looking or hoping for the astronauts to see? And then also, have they gotten photographs of any other celestial bodies besides the moon already, or is that planned for the next couple days?
Yes. If you ask, 100 lunar scientists what their favorite features are, I'm sure you get 100 different answers. I think I'll maybe cheat and give a couple. I think Orientale is obviously extremely compelling. This is an impact basin that plays such a critical role in not just lunar science, but in planetary and solar system science. It's the type impact basin we use to understand impact processes across the solar system, which is one of the most ubiquitous processes across the entire solar system. And we've never had human eyes on by far the majority of it. I will say, a little bit closer to home, the crew is really excited about that target, and they're really excited about, understanding its significance in lunar science and planetary science. So I'm really eager to hear their descriptions specifically of Orientale, just given the excitement that the lunar science team has and that the crew has. We also, when we were training the crew, we gave them a Big 15 lunar geography challenge. So we gave them 15 features across the entire surface of the moon that at any given time, no matter when they launched and what the illumination was, they'd be able to see at least 5 of them at the time. And so if you can, know these 15 features, you will always be able to orient yourself on the moon. One of our targets that they'll actually look at twice on Monday is Ohm Crater. That was one of the Big 15. They've used it as sort of this, quizzing themselves. We actually literally made them flashcards for understanding lunar geography. And so I'm excited that Ohm made it into the targeting plan and that they'll actually get to see it twice under different illumination conditions. So there's a lot of Yeah, really exciting potential for the observations. And, frankly, what I'm the most excited about for Monday is hearing those descriptions starting to come down from the crew. They've practiced for many, many, many months on visualizations of the moon and getting their eyes on the real thing. Really, really looking forward to them bringing the moon a little closer to home on Monday.
Next up, Will.
Hi, Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you all for taking the time. Question for John Honeycutt. In your mission management chair role, we heard early this morning when the crew first woke up, early days, but it sounded like there may be some weather in the splashdown zone that's being watched at this point. I wonder if you can give us the assessment at this phase of the mission, how the splashdown recovery is looking, and then putting your SLS hat back on. You mentioned earlier in your remarks, the rocket performed pretty straight down the middle and even better than Artemis I. Even given that, are there some tweaks or finesses that you'd like to see between this rocket that just flew and the rocket that will fly on Artemis III? Thanks.
So I'll take the first question as far as entry weather. So it's a little too far out right now for our models to converge, but I'll tell you our meteorologists have been monitoring what we think the models are gonna do, and we're essentially in between two systems. And if those systems either speed up or slow down, then we might have a case where the weather might not be good in the San Diego area, and we might have to go a little bit more uprange into the Pacific. But again, those models it's too far out to know that. So we'll get better models Monday or Tuesday, and so that's when we'll plan to send the recovery ships to the proper staging area in planning for entry. And so, John, you want to talk about them?
Yeah, it's still a little bit early in the data review process, and so the numbers that I've got right now are based on the limited amount of data that we've got. I think the resolution will continue to get better, and if it points to something that we need to go do to change on the rocket, we'll go do it. And, for instance, we had to we learned something in Artemis I, and we went and put the strakes on Artemis I, and they did their job fantastically. So, we'll be vigilant going through the data, and whatever the data turns up and we need to address it, we'll be ready to go do that.
Thank you. We'll take another question here in the room.
Hi, I'm Hanju Yang from Kookmin Daily in South Korea. My question is for John Honeycutt. And K-Rod Cube, the Korean CubeSat carried on Artemis II, unfortunately failed to establish communication. And despite the setback, it was a meaningful first step for Korea's participation in an international crewed lunar mission. Looking ahead, what kinds of opportunity will future SLS mission offer for international partners like Korea to participate beyond CubeSat ride shares?
Yeah, so given where we are on the mission that is being planned for SLS and the architecture that the administrator and the associate administrator talked about over the last couple of weeks, I'm not aware of anything that they're doing. That doesn't mean there can't be something coming up. I would just say that the capability, if called upon, especially in the configuration that we're in for Artemis II, if it's needed, I think it'd be ready.
Next up, another question in the room.
Hi, Alejandro Turnbull from Space Scout. Over the course of today, we've heard that Christina might have had a little bit of issues with her computer, her personal computer, and just wondering if any of you could speak to what those issues were and what you're doing about them, and then also how you're going to take those learnings from that, as well as Reed's viral issue with his email from the early part of the mission, and apply those to future Artemis missions and personal computers on future missions.
Yes, so Christina's portable computing device, it failed. I mean, it's a computer failure, so it's not usable anymore. But we still have three, that Reed, Victor, and Jeremy have, and so she's able to swap out and use, borrow their computers for any uses that she may have. As far as the email issues, again, that's just because we're not connected to the internet or to a sync all the time. We have to do manual syncs, and sometimes those files get corrupted. So I wouldn't say it's a real big issue. We got it corrected, and so it's not unlike issues that we see on the International Space Station. Sometimes we have to do some IT support, and I would say that's just nominal. We understand how to work those and carrying those forward.
Another question here in the room.
Hi, Katrina Miller from the New York Times. This question is for Kelsey. Can you clarify that there are parts of the moon that have never been seen by human eyes that will be seen by the Artemis II crew? And then I'm also curious if you have any words to share on the cultural importance of seeing the far side of the moon with human eyes.
The reason there are parts of the far side that have never before been seen by human eyes are that it's because that when Apollo missions launched, they prioritized launching into windows where the near side was illuminated, because that's, of course, where the Apollo missions landed. And so for when Apollo astronauts were orbiting the moon, the far side, they of course orbited over the far side, but it was not illuminated at the time when they were in orbit. Also, they flew much closer to the moon than Artemis II will fly, and therefore the horizon views of their spacecraft did not permit them to see the poles. And so we have a really unique vantage point with the Artemis II mission where the crew will actually be able to see the whole lunar disk. This means that they'll be able to see the poles, and they'll also be able to provide scientific context for their observations. Some of the really neat things about lunar surface processes, especially impact cratering, is they can toss material hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers across the surface. And because of this unique vantage point that Artemis II has, which is so much farther away than we experience with Apollo, they'll actually be able to provide context for those processes that are so influential across the entire lunar surface, where one crater in the northern hemisphere can shed material all the way down into the southern hemisphere. We're looking forward to the unique views.
Back in the room, this gentleman in the black cap.
Thanks. Robert Coppinger from the British Interplanetary Society Spaceflight magazine. I have a question for Debbie Korth and a question for John Honeycutt. The question for Debbie Korth is, which future Orion vehicle will be the first to benefit from changes mandated from the evaluation of the Artemis II, performance of Orion on Artemis II? And for John Honeycutt, you have less than 2 years before SLS is to launch with the Centaur upper stage. Can you give us an idea of what are the most important technical milestones between now and the launch? They have to be met in order for the Centaur to be integrated into the SLS to carry another crewed vehicle.
I'm sorry, in what stage are you talking about?
The Centaur.
Oh, the Centaur stage?
Centaur, okay, yeah. Centaur,
okay,
not
yeah.
Centaur, Centaur.
Yeah.
Stage, yeah.
So, when I took this mission management team job, we were in the beginning stages of already kind of starting to look at that. So we've looked at it from a perspective of what kind of adapter we would use for it. Right now we use the launch vehicle stage adapter to adapt to the ICPS, which is basically the old Delta stage, right? So we've done some work and some studies, and the team has, and I really don't know what they've done over the last 6 months. I know they've made some progress, but I just don't have an update on it. But I think the primary thing for us would be, building a new adapter to be able to integrate that stage, and then making sure that we get it integrated well with the launch, with the mobile launch platform and the tower, which early on indications that that's not going to be a problem.
I think on your question was what spacecraft will be first to benefit from what we learn off of Artemis II. And I think it probably depends on what we learn. I mean, we anticipate we'll learn things that will feed into Artemis III. So we have Artemis 3, 4, and 5 spacecrafts all in various stages of production at our factory at the Kennedy Space Center. So we are within the first, shortly after the mission, getting the data back, within 60 days, have the flight test report that we can look at and say, what did we learn, and start seeing where we can feed it in. So, depending on if it's something super critical, we'll force it into 3. If it's something that we, it's a nice to have or a tweak that we could wait till 4 or 5. So I think it really depends on what we learn and on where we'll actually feed that in first.
We're going to hop back over to the phone bridge with Micah Maidenberg in the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you. A question for Kelsey Young. I think you touched on this a bit, but could you just elaborate a little bit more on how the crew is trained to describe what they're seeing on the lunar surface? How do you get everyone to provide the best possible descriptions of what's in front of them, given the science objections? I mean, are they learning specific vocab or trained to really dial into specific features on the lunar surface? Thanks so much.
You guys are asking me all my favorite questions today. We train the crew in a few different ways. First and foremost, in the classroom. So I want to make it known that astronauts have to sit in the classroom and do homework as well, even ones that are going to the moon. So we sit in the classroom with them. We teach them better science objectives. We try to really keep it hands-on and have them integrate a lot of description practice. A lot of we get their hands on rocks, even though this crew isn't going to the surface. It's important to understand what the material looks like that they're going to be describing. We also take them out in the field. We took all 4 prime and 2 backup crew to the Icelandic Highlands, and we, had them practice descriptions there as well. Really what we're trying to do is, of course, just build their toolkit, right? I mean, we're not trying to train them on the ground for a specific flyby because we don't know exactly what moon is going to be presented to them when they get there. So what we're trying to do is, turn them into field scientists. They're parts of the lunar science team in our eyes. They're the field scientists, the explorers, doing the scientific exploration, and we want to prepare them to be able to do that. And so, really critical for our team and the crew has been getting them also in the mission simulations with, the rest of the flight control team, where we actually show them, renderings, visualizations of different flyby conditions and have them actually practice giving them descriptions. Then our lunar science team will go back, listen to those descriptions, and provide feedback. I can tell you that, just having this crew describe visuals of the moon, visuals of the lunar surface, will give you goosebumps. And so they are absolutely prepared not just to give really scientifically compelling descriptions, but also to bring that experience verbally to us watching here on Earth. And so, yes, we started small with the vocab, but by the time they launched, this crew, they are absolutely invested in our lunar science objectives. They really understand them, and they understand the features that they're going to be asked to observe and why they're being asked to observe those features. I also want to point out that, as members of the science team, they're the in situ explorers. They're the ones that are empowered to understand our objectives and execute accordingly. So we've, made sure to tell them that we are giving them a science plan. We are giving them guidance that is tied to our science objectives. Our science objectives. You can feel free to flexibly execute that plan if you see something else that pops out to you. And to encourage them to do that, we also have some targets built into their lunar targeting plan that are called crew choice. So they get to choose their own adventure and what pops out to them as the scientists doing the exploration. And the last thing I'll say is that, the morning, the crew morning after the flyby, we'll actually have a crew conference with them specifically focused on science. And to us, that is not a debrief, that is active data collection. The same way field scientists in the field, they take notes, they describe what they see, they have to sync together before they head back to the lab and forget everything, the nuanced observations from when they were actually doing the data collection in the field. So we are really looking forward to that crew conference where we can ask them follow-ups, we can synthesize, have a synthesis discussions on what they saw across the entirety of the flyby. We've actually simmed this, practiced this a few times with them, and just having 4 brains on the discussion at the same time so they can kind of build off of each other is really scientifically impactful. So this crew is absolutely ready to deliver on the lunar science objectives, and the lunar science team is just trying to set them up for success the best we can.
Our next question on the phone bridge is from Leo Enright with Irish Television.
Thanks very much. I'm a TV guy, so I'm interested in the TV pictures. I was wondering if somebody could talk about what we might expect in terms of live television during the flyby. I mean, I assume the optical comm system won't be available. It'll be turned in the wrong direction, I presume. But, will we get the SAW camera imagery, or will the crew be shooting stuff out the window, or what can we expect?
Yeah, I think I'll be back tomorrow to talk about the details of the flyby itself. But the quick answer is that yes to all of those things. So we will be getting SAW camera video streaming during the flyby, except of course the loss of signal when they go behind the moon. We will also be hearing from them several times an hour verbally on what they're seeing out the window. So really looking forward to hearing those descriptions in real time. They'll be recording the rest on board, but we'll hear a few times an hour from all of the crew members on what they're experiencing. And for parts of the flyby, we'll actually be able to go on board with them with that camera you guys have been seeing over the last couple days. I will say that most of the lights will be off inside the cabin because that's how we get good imagery of the moon, but we will be able to kind of take that ride along with them. And yes, they will be taking pictures. They'll actually be using 3 Nikon cameras, 2 D5s and 1 Z9, each equipped with a different zoom lens to capture, varying features. We pick the lens that's best for the objective. So you'll be seeing a lot on Monday, real time, and tomorrow I think I'm on tap to explain a little bit more about how the crew are structuring themselves during the flyby and a little bit more about what we're going to be seeing.
And I would add that the optical comm is only really available during the crew sleep period, so don't expect the high-res video, but you will have, as Kelsey mentioned, the SAW cameras through our nominal low-rate video.
And we're looking forward to take advantage of that optical comm to get down some great photos overnight.
All right, we'll go to another question here in the room.
Jerry Rothwell from Lightbox. You mentioned you were tracking the burning odor that Jeremy Hansen mentioned this morning. I wondered if you could say a bit about what the possible causes of that were and whether they're a concern.
Yeah, you meant the dusty heater smell. Is that what you're referencing? Yeah. So that was the smell I referenced, that we had some report of a smell that we don't understand where it's coming from. So we did actually look at our power data, our heater data. Nothing looks anomalous. We have an anomaly gas analyzer that we can use to check the constituents of the air. Nothing showing up. So we don't know exactly yet. We're still troubleshooting where that might be coming from. The teams are looking at some data we had on the ground where that same similar type smell had been reported, and think it might be more mechanical in nature, some tapes and some other materials that might be off-gassing, but really early in that investigation, so don't think there's any hazardous condition. Those gas analyzers have come back with everything fine. So just trying to figure out what could possibly cause them. So the teams now are looking at some ground testing we can do with some of these materials to see if it really is what we think it might be. Also sending up an additional questionnaire to the crew to get a little more details on what they smelled and when and how that correlates with other activities that were going on at the time. See if we can have any correlation between other events and that smell that they noticed. So we're still in the middle of investigating.
Another question here in the room.
Hi, Dan Lenahan with the Naval Postgraduate School of the U.S. Navy. And I have a couple questions about flight testing. And I guess in orbit, they did a spacecraft flight test, and they're about ready to do another one tonight, like you mentioned. And Reed and Victor are both naval aviators and test pilots. And maybe you can explain a little bit, why they were chosen for this mission, their expertise and what qualifies them to fly this first mission, and a little bit about the envelope expansion that they'll be doing.
So yeah, as to the reason why they were chosen, exactly because they were test pilots, right? And so that is a key aspect of understanding a new vehicle is the handling characteristics, and so they speak that language.
Yeah, I guess in terms of expanding the envelope, it'll be the first time we're actually flying the spacecraft. And so, during the RPOD demo that was earlier in the mission, we got great verbal feedback from Victor on every step of that demonstration, and understanding is the vehicle responding the same way the simulators do that we're doing on the ground? Is it the same kind of response time and feel of the vehicle, so we can improve the simulators if we need to better match the vehicle and make changes there. So getting that verbal feedback from him on how it's performing and how that matches our expectations and our models and our simulations is what we'll use to see if we can expand the envelope at all.
And we are going to head over to the phone bridge to Robert Perlman with collectspace.com.
Hi, for Dr. Young, I know the far side is the prime focus, but you said in watching the visualization that they would have some time with the lit near side. Are any of the Apollo sites going to be in view as they start that flyby?
I can come back with that tomorrow. I think they might be right at the beginning, a couple of them, but I will confirm that and come back to this group tomorrow. And yes, they will see a significant chunk of the near side, including some features that are visible to all of us if we go out and look at the moon at night, especially with binoculars, but even some of the features they'll be looking at, binoculars not necessary, you'll be able to go out and connect with them in that way.
And we will take one last question here in the room.
Hi, JJ Love with Tech Talk Media. Thanks so much for taking my question. This is for everyone, and just a quick one. 50 years from now, what do you hope people will say this mission made possible?
I would hope that people would say that this made possible a continued presence on the moon, that we are now living and working on a regular basis on the moon in 50 years.
Yeah, I guess Judd stole my answer. So, absolutely. I mean, this is the first step, and that's all of our hope and dream. I think everyone that's sitting at this table is that this is really going to lead to having that permanent presence and get people living and working on the moon. And it won't be such an anomaly that we'll have people, flying around there doing the great science.
Yeah, I have to dive into the science for a second. I think I'm glad you picked the time horizon that you did of 50 years, right? Because think about, where Apollo was 50 years ago, and scientifically how far we've come in that period of time, understanding not just the moon and the solar system, but our own planet. We didn't really understand plate tectonics at the time when these missions flew 50 years ago, right? And so Apollo played such a big role in helping us understand not just the moon, but our own planet as well. One thing that Christina says a lot that I just get, happy feelings every time she says it, because it's one of my favorite fun facts about the moon, is that the moon is a witness plate for the whole solar system and for our own planet. What the moon has experienced, we have experienced. They're basically in our backyard. But here on Earth, we have plate tectonics and oceans and vegetation that has obscured big chunks of the history of our planet. It is preserved on the moon. It is waiting for us on the moon. That period of our planet's history that we can no longer get here, even if we go to the deepest parts of the ocean, is there on the moon. And Apollo samples really helped us unlock that discovery, especially in the near side equatorial regions where they landed. The South Pole, the far side, very different geologically, geographically, and chronologically from where we visited with Apollo. And just thinking about the scientific discovery that those missions unlocked over 50 years ago, my hope is that we are sitting here 50 years from now, and not only have we made those scientific advancements, but just like in Apollo, this next generation of explorers and scientists are inspired to contribute. I'm sure people across NASA would say that the Apollo missions got them here to this agency working on this mission today, and I am just so optimistic for what this is going to do for the next generation and for the kids watching at home and the kids 50 years from now who are looking up at that sustained presence. This mission's just the first step.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there, I've had the pleasure of listening to these answers and thinking a little bit, but we've seen a lot of things throughout our history, especially here in the United States and probably even more, even across the world, but I'm focusing on what we've done, space flight in the U.S., right? And there's been a lot of technology development that's kind of spawned off of the things that NASA did when we've taken on these hard missions. And so, 50 years from now, I would hope they would say, boy, are we glad that they went back to the moon and they stayed.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us for today's briefing. We have set up a frequently asked questions page if you do have a question that perhaps wasn't answered today, but we will be joining you again tomorrow for another mission status briefing beginning at 5:30 p.m. Central, and we do hope we'll see you there. But for now, that'll do it for us here. Thanks so much.